Hey everyone, my name is Kyle May with Surrendered Image Interview. Today I am interviewing William Paul Young. Paul, as he goes by, is the best-selling author of The Shack. With 20 million copies sold, he is in high commodity. So without further ado, let's take a listen to what Paul had to say about why being an atheist is halfway to Jesus. Hello, Paul, and welcome to Surrendered Image.
I am honored to be with you. Thank you.
So, you were born a Canadian, eh?
I was, eh? Absolutely. I was born in Grande Prairie, Alberta, actually, which is not too far away from where you are. But, yeah, I was there. I spent a week there when I was born, but it's the only time I've ever seen the place. But they sort of claim to me as their own, which is great.
Well, okay, Canuck to Canuck, I have to ask, what's the biggest Canadian stereotype that you find Americans just don't get, and vice versa?
Oh, great question. The one they're most intrigued with is our predilection to apology.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
and, which causes a great amount of fun down here. A lot of Americans south of the Canadian border are very uneducated with regard to anything north of the U.S. borderline. And so we have great fun with that, too. My brother was in Chicago one time. He was with a cabbie, and the cabbie said something. He said, "Where are you from?" And my brother said, "Canada." He says, "Oh, this is in Chicago, of all places." Mm-hmm. And he says, "That's up near Washington State, right?" And my brother, if you knew him, he just smiles and he goes, "Yep, right up near Washington State." He says, Canada's changed a lot. We only have 317 days in a year now that we've gone to the Celsius system." and the guy goes, "Oh yeah, I've heard something about that." My brother just let it go,
Yeah.
So there's a lot of funny things. They don't understand how big it is and how few people we have. It's always an amazing, nor how much we've infiltrated into the U.S. I think at one point Canadians wanted to take over the U.S., but I think they've changed their minds.
We're big enough. We actually have
Exactly.
we have a writer.
I won't apologize for it, too.
Yeah, well, we might, though. It's just in our nature. It's bred into us.
I think so. It's a great thing. I love being Canadian born. It's one of the more fun things. When I do Q&R, I tell people down here, and I'm actually, as of less than a year, a dual citizen. So, but I needed to do that for other reasons. But I do Q&R, which is questions and responses, and I tell them, if I was born in the U.S., I'd probably do Q&A. But I'm a Canadian, so I do questions and responses. Because if I was born here, I'd probably have all the answers, but I don't.
Oh, that's great. We actually have an author on our Surrendered Image site who, actually most of our authors are American, except for two of us. But the one, Andrew Nelson, he was telling me a story about coming up to Canada, and when he was about 12 or 13 years old for he was a Boy Scout, and I said, "Oh, that's great." I said, "Where were you at? Which province?" And he goes, "Well, I don't know, dude. I was in Canada. I was there was bush."
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I went, wow. Yeah. Well, Paul, you wrote your first book, The Shack, for your kids as part of your healing process. I was wondering if you could tell us what you were healing from.
Great question. And really, to be a little bit more accurate, the Shack wasn't written as part of the healing process.
Okay.
It was really an expression of the healing process. And I think there's a big difference in that. I think sometimes if you write and it's not that what you write is not therapeutic as you do it. It always is. And it's always cathartic in some sense. But the real major part of my healing process had what I call the renovation of the soul, the inside house, the house on the inside that people help us build. And which for a lot of us is just a shack, a place where we store our addictions and hide our secrets. We don't want anybody to ever find it or come in there.
Right.
And so we created a false building, a facade, 100 yards away from our shack, and that way we can paint it as fast as we can pick up people's expectations. my writing the shack, the main character Mackenzie spends a weekend inside his own soul. And that weekend represents an 11-year process for me.
Okay.
And that had to do a lot with just some of the devastation of my childhood. I had some really wonderful things about the way that I grew up, and some gifts that were associated with it, but there was great sadness as well. My father's father had destroyed my dad's ability to be a father, really, by the time I showed up as the firstborn child, and so that chip wasn't in him, and he was a pioneer missionary coming out of the woods. He was a logger in D.C., and as an 18-year-old at a camp meeting, ran into a massive intersection with Jesus, and it propelled him to Bible school, and then he got married to my mom, met her at Bible school. They took a little church in Alberta. I was born in Grand Prairie. When I'm 10 months old, we pack everything we have. We moved to the other side of the planet, where my parents were pioneer missionaries in the highlands of New Guinea, and that's where I grew up. Mm-hmm. So my relationship with my dad has been an ongoing and arduous part of the journey, and it's, I know his history, and I've got a historian on my dad's side. My dad's oldest sister, Gladys, is a for real historian, and she's done a lot of work on the family. So I know the framing for my dad's story, and I know a lot of what he was courageous enough to walk away from. But he had dragged a lot of baggage into the marriage and into his relationship with his children. And this was back in the day when, that generation didn't even know they had baggage. And I wouldn't have known what to do with it if they'd have known. And so that was part of my great sadness. It took 50 years. This is how I put it as one of the ways to explain the process, and that is, it took me 50 years to wipe the face of my father off the face of God. And
wow.
And so a lot of how I saw the character and nature of God was that. Another big sadness for me was sexual abuse that happened in the tribal culture. It was part of the tribal culture, and it was part of my boarding school experience starting at about 6 years old. So I don't think there's anything that is as devastating to the fabric of the human soul as that kind of abuse. Mm-hmm. And because 5-year-old and 6-year-old children, they do not have the capacity to process that at all.
No.
And so they take the blame for it. They bury it inside. It becomes the roots of a massive ocean of shame that underlies all their performance orientation. And survival becomes the demand of the day. And so between a very difficult relationship with my dad and the absence of my mom, because they were busy doing the missionary stuff, and she was a follower anyway, so I don't have hardly any memories of her at all as a child. And then I was shipped away to boarding school right about when I was 6 years old. So and that opened up a whole different set of issues with the sexual abuse in boarding school, and then with some of the other just devastation of belonging, I think, is probably the third great sadness. Mm-hmm. Because I lost my tribe, I lost my family, I lost my color in the transition to boarding school. And so that became the house on the inside that was all broken. And it took me a lot of years to be able to go back into that place. Because what I try to do is live as if it didn't exist. I didn't want to deal with my stuff. And I didn't think God liked that place at all, because it was obvious that was the center of my inability to perform in any kind of religious sense. Mm-hmm. And so, 11 years starts a devastating process of trying to deal with it, starting when I'm 38 years old. I'm married. I have 6 kids at the time. I'm the ones who I wrote the book for. And then, at the end of those 11 years, I finally feel healthy enough as a human being to write something as a gift for my children. And this is at the behest of my wife, Kim, who wanted me to write songs, because I wrote gifts all my life.
Okay, yeah.
The second half of my life for friends and family. And I wrote this, trying to get it done as a Christmas present, and just say, look, here's a story, and inside this story is my history. And my 11 years was the reconstruction. Not that there isn't lots of finish work to do, but the major tearing down of the right to the foundations and fixing even the foundations that were all cracked and broken.
Right.
And rebuilding the house on the inside, finding out what's real and what's not. All of that was then expressed in this story. And I think that's partly why it's resonated so deeply with so many people, is, as well as Crossroads has, is because they're authentic stories, asking human questions, really core things that all of us struggle with, our great sadnesses, the questions about the character and nature of God, do we have any meaning? Do we matter at all as individual human beings? How do I deal with not only the sadness, but then all the stuff that's been broken along the way? And then what do I do with the fact that then I turned around and broke things in other people's lives, especially those who I want to love the best?
Mm-hmm.
So those are all wrapped inside the questions with regard to it. Yep.
For sure. Paul, hearing your story brings to mind, I'm wondering, how difficult was it for you to reveal the pain that you went through while you were writing this, your own personal pain?
By the time I wrote it, it wasn't that difficult because I've been working on this for 11 years. I've not put it out there, and especially in story form. And I use this story because to me, the greatest loss of a human being is the loss between a parent and a child. Mm-hmm. But it represents also the loss of our own child. So I'm in the storyline. I'm both Mackenzie and Missy.
Right.
A writer from Nashville wrote me when the book first came out and said, I don't know who you are, I don't know anything about you, but my sense is that Missy represents something murdered in you as a child, probably your innocence.
Okay.
And Mackenzie is you as an adult trying to deal with it.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of us who totally get that.
Yeah, for sure.
It's that loss. And if we experience the loss of a child as a parent, that is the greatest loss. And it asks the best question. In a world that's broken already, where is God, who is supposed to be good and powerful, in the middle of these kinds of losses that are so devastating to the very core?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I'm trying to, when I'm writing this for the kids, and our youngest is 21, so they're not like little kids, but
right.
I'm writing this going like, what if I'm not there, and the brokenness of this world intercepts my children in such a way that they experience the devastation of this kind of loss? What would I want to communicate to them about pain and suffering and loss and the wonder of this creation and the character and nature of God? So all of that wove into the storyline.
Oh, that's excellent. In the shack, Jesus says to Mackenzie, I didn't come to make people Christians. I'm not one. That's a really loaded statement for a lot of people within the church. Could you explain what you were trying to convey when you wrote that?
Sure. Yeah. And page 182, depending on your edition. And there are two things on that page that got me consistently in a little bit of hot water, and that was one of them. And so in that scene, Jesus says to Mackenzie exactly what he said. Mackenzie, I didn't come to make people Christians. And he says, I'm not one. Mm-hmm. And it's true. Jesus was never a Christian. And it's not like, he ascended and then he went, oh my gosh, if I'd have just waited for like 20, could have become a Christian, and he didn't come to start a new religion. Christianity is not founded by Jesus. The religious side of Christianity is something that was created over the centuries as an institutional or system. And it's not that it's without its own beauty and wonder and elegance, but it's a humanly fabricated system. And therefore it has all the inherent damage that we create systems out of. And so he didn't come to make people Christians, because he's not asking, okay, so I've come to make a new religion here in the smorgasbord of humanly crafted religious systems. I'm going to give you another option.
Right, yes.
If you don't pick what's behind 3, there's hell to pay. You know, and we have this mentality about us and them. What we've got to do is get people to walk across the bridge so that they join our club, which is called Christian. And it's just like the passage in Acts where Peter gets up and he says, "This, what you have just witnessed, is a fulfillment of what Joel the prophet said centuries ago when he said that the Holy Spirit would be poured out on all flesh." Now, a couple really great things. One is it's all flesh. There's not anybody you will ever meet that the Holy Spirit has not been poured out on. And the second thing is there were no Christians in the audience, because that was a term that wasn't even created yet.
Yeah, exactly.
And initially, the term was used as a derogatory term, which the community of faith kind of embraced, because it was a backhanded compliment. They were the Jesus kind of people. They were, you know, the Christ-like people, or the ones who followed this Messiah. And so it was used derogatorily, and they went, "Oh yeah, well, we can identify with that." Unfortunately, we've turned it into a definition,
right?
Rather than a compliment, and then we've turned this definition into something that has created this huge monster division inside humanity, unnecessarily. And as a result, we've skewed what the gospel is. We've skewed the personhood of Jesus. We've ended up with a low view of humanity. All kinds of things have spun out of the creation of that religious system. Jesus didn't come to start a religious system. He came to show us what it's like to be fully human and fully alive, and that is inside a relationship with the Father and the Spirit, and inside an embracing of his own humanity and the humanity of all of us. And all of us were created in him. That's New Testament theology.
So would you define yourself as a Christian?
It depends. I have no trouble identifying myself as one. Like Coburn does. One of the things I like to say, if people say, "Are you a Christian?" I say, "Well, tell me what you think one is, and then I'll tell you if I'm one of those." Because a lot of times I am. A lot of times people's definitions is like, "No way, I am not one of those." It's kind of like, Paul, are you an atheist?
Right.
Well, tell me what the atheist that you're thinking of doesn't believe in, because I get asked about atheism all the time. And frankly, between you and I'm kind of thinking atheism is halfway from religion to Jesus. And so when I get asked by, especially the Brits, because, they keep pumping out these new atheists like Dawkins and Hitchens, and so they're always asking about those books, and my perspective, and I say, well, I could agree with them. And they go, "You agree with the atheists?" I go, "Yeah. I don't think the God that they don't think exists either."
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like, okay, so how do we identify? I don't mind being identified on a lot of different levels, because I can find some way to say, you know what, there is something inside the way you think that I can identify with, and I'm good with that.
Mm-hmm.
I am totally entrusting of the person of Jesus, and through Jesus is how I got introduced to the real nature and character of God the Father and Spirit. So I'm very much Trinitarian. That is, three persons who are in such a dance of oneness. Mm-hmm. We believe in absolutely one God, and but there are three persons, which is part of the whole beauty of relationship and of love.
Oh, that's great. Speaking of the Trinity, many people have claimed that the Shack was groundbreaking in that it helped lead people to a better concept of what the Trinity, or who the Trinity really is. However, at the same time, your biggest critics, like you say, are Christians. And
well, that's always been true, right?
Well, if
I think Jesus ran into the same boat.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you find anything that kind of threatens a man-made kingdom in any sort of the sense, and in some ways your book does, there's a tendency for people to run off and speak against it, and I guess we're seeing that, we see that with the Shack. But on one end of the spectrum, I have heard people that have labeled the book like amazingly eye-opening, right? And yet I've heard other people scream that it's heretical and dangerous.
So most of those people have never read it. I mean, that is flat out the truth. I'd say 95% of the people who are angry about the book have not read it.
Okay. No, I was going to ask, well, why do you think that the church is so afraid of it? But that could be the point.
Well, those are my people. I mean, I come from that tradition, right?
Yeah.
So the way we grew up, it wasn't ever about actually loving. It was about being right. And so we're very caught up in our Western dualistic rationalism. And so the idea of my checking off a list of propositions becomes much more centrally important than my integration of love and kindness and grace into my expressions of how I live. So the people who are upset with the book almost unanimously are my people. So and I always say, be careful how you talk about them, because those are my people. And I get it. I understand why they're afraid, and how much they are holding on to their set of propositions.
Sure.
When somebody's upset and they're coming to talk to me, there's a couple things that I know, and I think partly this is being 59 years old, and part of it is that I grew up inside this, and it's taken me a long time to get the chips off my shoulders, but I really care about these folks, and they're my people. So when somebody comes and they're mad, there's a couple things I know. I know that if I think they're coming to tell me about me, that we're going to have a fight.
Okay.
But I know they're not. They don't know me. And so there's no way they're coming to tell me about me. So they're using the only way they know how to tell me about what matters to them.
Right.
What's important to them, what they're afraid of. And they've learned how to couch it in language that keeps a distance. And it's the language of intellectual rationalism or ideas or theology or whatever, doctrine, whatever. But they're engaged. An emotionally engaged person is still engaged.
Right.
A person who just doesn't care. There's no conversation to be had. And there may be no conversation to be had with someone who's just, really ticked off. But at least they're engaged. And if I'm not at risk in the conversation, then I can listen to maybe a good question to ask in response, or maybe a hug that I can just step inside all of that and just give them a hug. I don't know. But a lot of times, this is about the movement from ideological distance toward relationship. And
okay.
So I'm not offended by that at all. And I understand why people are upset. People think that imagery defines God, and it never has. This is why imagery is all over the place in Scripture. Male, female, animal, inanimate objects. God's a rock and a shield and a strong tower and a fortress. And I mean, we know that God's not a rock.
No.
We understand that's imagery. But then we forget that the rest of it is imagery too. There are ways of trying to understand the massive, immense, elegant, beautiful, wondrous, too beautiful for words, character and nature of God through these little windows.
Right.
Called imagery. And as long as those windows don't become what we worship, and we think that defines God, then we're just exploring, which is God's invitation.
The Shack has spawned a Shack devotional. It's spawned other books. It's particularly the Shack Revisited. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
The Shack Revisited is the single best book that has ever been written so far, and it may be that way forever. But with regard to just exploring what's beneath the theology, if you will, of the Shack, or what else is really going on here. And the author is a PhD. He's born and raised in Mississippi, but he got his PhD in Aberdeen, Scotland, with some of the greatest minds of the 20th century, theologically speaking, the Torrance brothers. And
Baxter Kruger, right? Yeah.
Kruger has become a friend. And my first conversation with him was back in the end of 2007 when I was still working my 3 jobs, but somebody had emailed me from the East Coast and said, "Do you know Baxter's work? Because he's been working for 20-something years on the theology that totally meshes with your story." And I said, "I've never heard of him." So he gave me his phone number. I called Baxter 2 days after he read a conversation that goes on to today. He's become one of my best friends. So the Shack Revisited is because Baxter's a Mississippi theologian, so he is a storyteller to the core.
That's great.
Incredibly good communicator. He is not playing the, I love theologians, and I love the fact that some of these folk spend their lifetimes working on one word or two words or something so that I don't have to. And I love what they bring to the table. But a lot of times they write in such language that nobody can access them.
Right.
And they're dealing with these brilliant, beautiful ideas, but it's like they're only talking to a small group of other people who can actually understand them. Mm-hmm. And nobody's thinking about, okay, so what do we do with this? They're thinking about, how do I find an argument against this? Or, it's that whole esoteric kind of ivory tower kind of stuff. And I think that's starting to break down. And theologians are beginning to become storytellers. Well, Baxter is one already to the core, has been for years and years. And I think that's why his stuff is so accessible. So the Shack Revisited is a very accessible, beautiful portrayal of what's going on in the Shack. And I highly recommend it. With everything else he's written.
He's just a great guy, hey?
He is.
Yeah.
He's if you're ever around him, he is just an easy human. He's one of those human beings where you can see that his theology and his life match. They're integrated. And so you see the kindness and the grace and the enjoyment of humanity and he loves fishing, and in fact in Mississippi he gets more invitations to cook crawfish boils than he ever does to speak. He's a really good cook, but he's also an artist. He crafts these fishing lures. I mean, it's just like, great human being.
That's excellent. Oh, it's good to hear. We need more people like that in this world.
Absolutely.
Paul,
may their kind increase.
Exactly. Paul, in 2012, you released a new book titled Crossroads. Did you feel any pressure that it had to measure up to the Shack in any way?
Great question, and also a great little story. So, because of having to work out the legal details of going separate directions because the Shack was published basically and shipped out of a garage in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. 26 publishers had turned it down, and so a couple guys in California created a publishing company, and because they had the foresight to say, I didn't, but they saw something there that would have this potential impact. So when we got to the place where we had to figure out how to go different directions, Hachette Publishers, who is the second largest publisher in the world, was involved in that process. They were taking the book internationally. And so as part of the agreement to go different directions, I agreed to do the next novel with them.
Okay.
Well, in that process, I said, there's nothing really here. They said, okay, that's all right. You have a year to do it. And, the first draft was due August 8th, 2012. And so I said, okay. And I talked to Kim about it, my friends, and all like green lights. I said, okay. Well, about 4 or 5 weeks later, I get a phone call from New York, and they say, Paul, great news. 7 languages have bought your next book.
Oh.
I'm going like, really? Do they understand that this is all smoke and mirrors? Like, really? And that's the first time I felt a sense of pressure.
Okay.
And it's like, oh my gosh, I have to do this on purpose. And
sorry.
So here's what happened, and this is such a beautiful thing. I have, I can work through stuff in a couple hours now that took me months, 10 years ago, and it just shows the healing movement in my life. So I kind of have this moment of freak outness, and I have this conversation with God, and I go all right, I'm at a place in my life, and I got there before I wrote the Shack. Everything that matters to me was in place. My identity, my worth, my value, my security. I'd finally become a child after living on this planet for 50 years. And children know how to live inside the grace of one day. So I'm going like, all right, I like this. I like not knowing what you're up to, and I don't want to know, because I'm a religious kid who can turn anything into an agenda.
Okay.
And I don't want to live that way. And so my prayer conversation was, so Papa, you know what? I don't know what your purposes are. So if your purposes are better served by August 8th, 2012 showing up, and I have nothing, and I fall flat on my face in front of the publishing world and in front of the reading world and all that, if that serves your purposes better, I am totally in. And I am. And that just totally released me. Well, I did this. I was on speaking things, and I got back home from a trip actually with Baxter to New Zealand. And somebody let me use a house down at Depot Bay on the coast of Oregon for 11 days. And Kim came down with us, one of her sisters and brother-in-law, for a couple of days. But other than that, I'm there by myself. And in 9 days, I wrote 35,000 words of an 80,000 word novel. And,
wow. It's quite the feat.
You know, but it was like stepping in the river when the timing's right. And I've learned how to trust that. And Crossroads is a beautiful book. Kim likes it better than The Shack. So I'm in.
That's great.
And, but it is. It's what's fun to watch is it's percolated up, especially with men, because they unfortunately identify with the main character, who's really quite an ass.
Okay.
And, so it's asking a different question. The question in Crossroads, the question in The Shack is God really good all the time? In the middle of my great sadness, where is he? And can I trust him? And so that's the question in The Shack. Crossroads, the question is, if you have the assumption that relationship is the world in which we get hurt, primarily our damage comes through relationships, but our healing also comes through relationship. How does transformation or change or grace get inside the world of someone who doesn't want it, who doesn't want relationships, who has fortified themselves against it, who has a wake of brokenness in their history relationally, and they don't want it. They just want self-protected security and success. So how does grace get inside that world? So that's the question.
That's an excellent question.
It's a great question, because for a lot of us it has great application.
Oh, for sure.
And Crossroads is centered on the issue of belonging too, which is my issue as a third culture kid. So
yeah. Could you tell us a little bit about the main character in this book?
Yeah, Anthony Spencer, which is, that's my son Matthew, who's 21. That's his Xbox avatar.
That's great.
I know. Fun, huh? And this is one of the cool things about writing that I didn't really understand, and that is you can do whatever you like, especially if you deal with fiction, right?
Right, of course.
So when The Shack came out, and my son Matthew, he goes, Dad, he's the youngest of the six, he goes, I got this Xbox avatar, Anthony Spencer. He just had made it up or because somebody is joking with him about the name or something. And, and he said, if you ever write another book, you've got to use Anthony Spencer. And so when I was working on Crossroads, I thought, you know what? How cool is this? I could use my son. And that puts my son in the book automatically because it's his Xbox avatar. So I gave Anthony his middle name.
Okay.
Which is Sebastian.
Okay.
So
any particular meaning behind that, or?
Well, think about it. Anthony Sebastian Spencer. Anything come to mind?
It's not.
Think about the acronym. Think about what the initials spell.
Say that again. Anthony Sebastian.
Anthony.
Oh, okay. Okay. Wow, I was a little slow on the take there, but
okay. Yeah,
so
in the book, he mostly goes by Tony, just because I want that pushed off just a little bit.
Okay.
And you don't actually know until about 2/3 way through the book what his name is. So it's just a kind of tongue in cheek, just.
For sure.
He's a successful guy, business guy, but he's got just a whole wake of broken relationships in his history. And so what confronts a person? And this is where the theme of Crossroads comes in. We all run into these these on a daily basis, but then there are major ones where it's kind of like, all right, what's working for you or what you thought was working for you doesn't actually work. All it's doing is creating more damage. So do you want to face it now, or do you want to just barrel right through this intersection and take out whoever's walking across the street? And so, you know, we get those opportunities. We create those opportunities. We create those crossroads ourselves. It's not like God has to create evil in our lives or some devastating event so that he gets our attention. God is not like that.
Right.
I don't think that there's any darkness in God at all.
No.
And but we have this great ability to create our own house of cards, and so that's what happens with Tony. He and I push it into the realm of the space between death and life.
Okay.
And it's and explore that some.
Okay, you're right. Absolutely, sounds like something that every man can relate to.
Yeah, and a lot of women, unfortunately, are married to them.
Oh, and it's something we find that's quite common in this Western society of ours, and so it's great to have something to speak to that for sure. So,
thank you.
You know, Paul, are there any other Paul Young projects underway?
Oh yeah, you know, this is so fun because I've always written. Who knew anybody else would care besides friends and family, right? And so I've actually got a massive third novel that I'm working on. It's actually been a 40-year project.
Oh wow!
I didn't know that I would ever be able to attempt it. I don't think I would have if I had written Crossroads and The Shack.
Okay.
Because they've given me a sense that it's even possible. And what the storyline is, the book was going to be called Eve.
Eve.
E-V-E.
Okay.
And it's a novel, but it's a massive re-narration of the first 4 chapters of Genesis with Eve as the protagonist.
Oh, wow.
Because I think that's the right narrative. I think that's the accurate narrative. And like I said, I've spent 40 years wrestling with certain questions, and one of the basic questions was, if men are so much more messed up than women, which I think is obvious, how come they're in charge?
Okay.
You know, and I'm coming from an evangelical Western Protestant frame of reference,
right,
based on a narrative of Genesis, and I think that the narrative is wrong, and I think we don't understand Paul the Apostle because he wasn't referring to our narrative; he was referring to the right one. So I'm working on retelling that, that book will probably come out next year.
That sounds absolutely amazing. You can sign me up right now. I'll be purchasing a copy. I love the premise.
Oh, the time has come. I think we're in the century of finally getting rid of the scale of power.
Oh yeah.
But we need a new narrative. We need a more accurate one.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm ready for this. And it just took 40 years of work to do the actual scholastic work as well as just the creative framing. And so I'm very thrilled about this, and so is everybody else who's a part of it.
Oh yeah, I'm excited just hearing about it. You know, Paul, here on Surrendered Image, we like to have a lot of fun. That is, we like to sometimes harass each other about our American and Canadian citizenships. As a result, you got a bit of foreshadowing, right? When I spoke about it earlier, but
Sure.
As a result, I plan on releasing a list of comparative answers in an article formed, I don't know, sometime between July 1st and July 4th of next year. And I'm wondering if you'd be willing to participate in this.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, great.
This is questions and response time because I'm, Canadian, so I don't have all the answers.
Well, you know what? I'm since you are Canadian by birth, I'm sure your answers will be right. So I'm just joking.
I'm dual citizen, so I can speak from both sides.
All right. Well, only one time have I ever had to take it outside with an American brother, Steve McVeigh. So he is
a great brother. He's a good man.
He is a great guy. He's excellent. He just doesn't really recognize who really won the War of 1812, and I've forgiven him for that. So no, there's no wrong answer, no right answer. It's just in fun. So I'll all right, okay. All right. Tim Hortons or Starbucks?
You know what? I'm a tea drinker, And neither one of them have the best tea, although Starbucks chai tea is really, really good with soy. And, when I'm in Canada, there's no question because there's a lot of times no option. And so I'm going to go with wherever I can find the best tea. And it's totally walking the tightrope on that one.
All right. Toque or beanie? Oh,
definitely toque.
Good stuff. All right. Shotgun wedding or nonviolent intimidation?
Premarital counseling.
All right. Loon or eagle?
A loon.
All right. Okay.
They have such a better sound. They're not like they're yelling at somebody.
It's true. I really enjoy the sound of a loon. Who won the War of 1812?
It depends on what you see as the outcome, right? The Canadians won it, but were smart enough not to annex all the property.
Okay. Brilliant answer. Royal Canadian Mounted Police or Texas Ranger?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I definitely go RCMP, but the Mounted Police.
Yeah?
You gotta love the Lone Ranger. I mean, I grew up with William Tell's Overture, when I was a teenager, and the Lone Ranger just kind of made this iconic, it kind of got ruined down the road by certain other actors in Texas.
Yeah, it did.
But I do love the RCMP. I think, I do.
Okay, good choice. Canadian beer or, those other beer?
Here's a funny thing. I'm allergic to only a couple things. One of them, three things that I know of for sure. One is Demerol, which is a drug that is a painkiller.
Right.
And I found that out by throwing up a lot. And,
great.
And then my other two allergies, physical allergies, are alcohol and carbonation. I can tell you that my family, and I pray for healing, by the way, for that.
Yeah.
I love the taste of certain kinds of alcohol, but can't drink it.
Right.
And so when I tell people I'm allergic, a lot of times they think I'm an addict, an alcoholic who's on the wagon, because I found out that that's one of the ways you communicate that in the big book. And it's really funny. I live in Portland, Oregon, which is a home of many, many microbrews. And so I'm going with the Pacific Northwest on this.
Okay.
Just because this is where I live in the world that I am, and this is the experience of my friends and family around me. So.
Okay. Well, you don't want neighbors and friends to jump you after they hear this, right? So.
It's just we live in the Northwest where it's like, oh yeah, keep Portland weird is our motto. So we have a brew down here called Slippery Slope.
Slippery Slope.
Yeah, that's a good one for a theologian.
Okay, yeah, exactly. Well, maybe you can fit that into your next book. Hockey or, those other sports?
I kind of like rugby, and I kind of like hockey, and I kind of like lacrosse. My relationship to sports is relational in nature. If I know somebody playing, or have one of my kids are playing, or friends' kids are playing, I'm in.
Okay.
And so, hockey, I loved it. I loved it when the Olympics were in Vancouver and we did the big sweep. That was so fun. So, it just depends on the conversation.
That's great. I think I was about 23 before I even realized other sports existed. So that was just being the Canadian, right?
Yeah. There's a few of them that are difficult for me, like cricket. I just can't get my mind around, and there's a couple like that are just like, oh, really?
No, I hear you. I'd have to turn down any invitation for cricket I ever got. So
I played competitive badminton, and they don't understand that hardly at all down here.
Oh, okay.
Now it's hard to watch on TV because you don't understand what it's taking out of those people to do that, and the high intensity and the demand of that sport is just beyond most people's understanding down here. So that's one of my favorite sports in the world.
All right, well,
curling too. Just saying.
Oh, you gotta love curling, right? I mean, that's born and bred into us out here. All right, Corner Gas or Duck Dynasty?
Not Duck Dynasty.
Not Duck Dynasty?
Although I know some of those folks and they're great folks.
Okay. Have you ever been on a skidoo in minus 30 weather and enjoyed it?
Oh yeah, definitely. I've been on a skidoo and a bombardier, and yeah, my brother raced them. So.
Oh really? Like yep. Wow, professionally or?
Yeah, semi. Races and jumping the jumps and all that stuff. He was nuts. To a degree.
Oh, you gotta love that. I mean, if he has any Alberta roots in him too, I mean, yeah, you gotta know we're crazy out here with all sorts of machines, right? So.
Yeah, his BC was.
Well, same thing.
They have trees in the way.
Yeah. Yeah. As they're going up a huge grade, right? So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Coming down the other side.
Yeah. Well, that's just the fun part. If you survive, you get to brag to all your friends. So.
Exactly.
Last one here, Paul. If you were trapped in the wilderness, which deadly situation would you prefer? Igloo and polar bear or rattlesnake and tent? Why?
Ooh, there's a good one. Igloo and polar bear. I always think of that Gary Larson cartoon where the polar bears are eating the igloo and they say, "Look, crunchy on the outside, soft on the inside."
Love Gary Larson.
I'd probably go igloo.
Yeah.
The thing about a rattlesnake is that they can get inside without you knowing about it,
mm-hmm.
and they're drawn to the warmth. At least you can hide. Igloo has it kind of blends into the landscape. So I definitely go igloo and polar bear versus rattlesnake and tent.
All right, good choice. That would be mine as well. So, all right. Well, Paul Young, everyone. The books are The Shack and Crossroads. Paul, thank you for this interview. You're an awesome guy, and I hope that we can do this again sometime.
That'd be great, Kyle. Thank you so much. Honored to be with you, and big hugs to all you out there, and thank you.